Hey everyone, Scott here. Today I wanted to talk to you about a new game that I've been playing. I've actually been playing it for the last few weeks here, and I've actually really been enjoying it. I know it might be taken away from some of the other games I've been playing, and at this time, unfortunately, my life has also been very busy, so I'm having a tough time finding stuff to play games anyway. But regardless, I'm going to talk to you today about Warframe. Now, Warframe is a free-to-play game from Digital Extremes. It's an interesting game because it's similar to the Mass 4 multiplayer, if anyone's ever played that. Now, it's also interesting because you build all your weapons and characters. Now, right now I'm in the Foundry and I'm just collecting the pieces to something called an Ash. Well, what is Ash? Well, Ash is a Warframe. Well, what is a Warframe? A Warframe is the suit or armor that your character wears going into combat, and they all have different abilities. For example, Ash in this case is a very stealth-based Warframe. Some of his abilities around things like throwing shurikens, being invisible, teleporting, and something called Blade Storm, where he just kind of goes crazy with some blades and stabs everybody in close proximity. So I'm just finishing purchasing him right now, the blueprint. I had the blueprints for all of his systems, and then they were subcomponents that were going to the final suit. Now, unfortunately, I need a little bit of money, so to actually make the suit itself, I've got everything else. I just need cash. And if you notice there, it also says build is 72 hours. That's real time, so it takes 3 days to build them. Now, you can purchase platinum in the game with real money, and this is how they fund the game. So I paid for some platinum, but in this case I'm not going to use it to speed up the Warframe. Now, you can go to each planet. Each planet contains a section of levels or missions that you can achieve. There's several different kinds. Right now I'm running with a Rhino, which is a big tanky type Warframe. He has a lot of abilities that absorb damage and do a little bit of crowd control at the same time. So he's a slow bugger. Like, he's hard to keep up with other Warframes at times, but when you're defending an objective in the middle of, say, a map, it's actually very valuable. Now, customization in this game is really cool. It's because all these cards can be fitted into each one of these slots, and these slots can then apply statistics back to your Warframe. So, for example, here I'm actually on the weapon. I'm on this weapon called a Hind. It's a machine gun. So what I've put on it is quick hands for reload. I've put on it infected clip, which adds poison damage, and hellfire. Now, when you mix those two together, you end up with, I think, radiation. I've also put serration on here, which is straight up damage increase. And if you notice that bar above the cards, underneath the letter A there, that's the amount of stat points that you can use to put into weapons. So I can put any combination of these in, so long as they fit together. And I think finally I put an ammo drum in there, which increases ammo. And I got another pistol here that I'm upgrading. Now, it's still fairly new, so I haven't really got a lot of levels on it. And finally, my melee weapons, which are these dual swords that I've been using. They proc what's known as heat damage. Now, they're fairly close to being max level, so you can see they're all filled up. In any case, now I'm all set up gear-wise. And this game gets really detailed in terms of, DPS and things like that. So there's a lot of tutorials out there people have been playing. Like, I only discovered this game a few weeks ago, but apparently it's been around for over a year now. And apparently it's still growing fairly fast in terms of player base, which is pretty cool. They do fund the game through some small transactions for things like platinum, which is an in-game currency. Plus, you can buy certain cards or rewards rather than grind them or find them in game straight up from their store, and that's okay. I mean, I don't mind paying for a game if it's good and it's all that kind of stuff. Now, this is the beginning of what we know as a defense mission. Now, these are also known as infected, which are kind of like the biological enemy of the game. They tend to want to charge you down with claws and teeth and whatever else to try to get you. That one with the red outline was a particularly tough one, and as a result, my melee weapon is actually going to be more useful to me than probably any other gun in here, just due to the sheer volume of infested enemies that are going to be running at me. And there we go. So, as you can see here, running around now, I'm collecting material, and I'm collecting money, and I'm collecting parts that can be used to be built in other weapons. This game I'm actually co-op. You can go up to 4 players per mission. And right now I'm in a group of just 4 random people, and anyone can drop into these games if you leave them open at any time. So as a result, you can usually fill up a party and do some running around and collecting things as you go. The game is still actively being developed. It is currently in a beta state, and probably will be for a long period of time here. I was just looking at some of the new updates that are coming down the pipe, and eventually they want to add things like player ships and stuff like that. Now, I'm also in a clan in this game, and clan sort of setups and sort of abilities in this game are kind of interesting. if you set up a clan, and you don't need a lot of people, like I'm only in a clan of 4 of my buddies, we set up a dojo, which is basically a headquarters or guild hall, depending on what your thinking is. And this is a space station that floats around in space. Now, you can go there at any time, provided you have the hosting abilities, and you can build stuff in there. You can build labs, you can build various, well, actually mostly labs that research new weapons for you. Now that actually leads me into another interesting part of this game. Now some missions or defense like this are pretty static maps, they don't change. But there's missions where you're chasing down convicts through them. There's missions where you just have to run through a level and exterminate all the enemies that are there. There's missions where you have to basically survive without life support by running from pod to pod at times and activating it. Things of that nature. Lots of little interesting quirky mechanics in this game, or quirky levels, and those levels are all procedurally generated with a tile set. What does that mean? Well, that means that each level is randomly generated so that it isn't identical every time you go to it, which adds a nice little bit of diversity. Now, they are built with a tile set, so there's like rooms that are connected by hallways, that are connected by air ducts and things like that. Kind of idea has been used in the Diablo series, I believe, to a different extent. Whereas you can run through a dungeon and it's always going to be different regardless if it's the same dungeon you just ran. And they've got some interesting travel mechanics. For example, I love these zip lines. These are fun. And I just love how he just grabs it and slides down. It's just like, arr. The other thing that was interesting is, like, you can wall run. You can, as you've seen there when I was climbing the tower, I was running up the wall, and you can run horizontally along the walls too. So if you want to fast travel along a wall. There wasn't a lot of opportunities for that in here, but, you know, you've seen some of the movements I did when I got up into that high location when I was looking for that last enemy that got stuck. Occasionally a mob enemy and these will get stuck and you have to go find them, but for the most part they do try to charge that cryopod in the middle and try to kill it, because if they destroy it then your mission is failed. Every 5 waves you get an opportunity to leave with said rewards. Now, the longer you stay, the better rewards you get, obviously. So you want to, depending on what you're trying to do, some guys just want to go in quick and get a quick buck and come out. Some guys want to go there and try to get to the top tier stuff that there's available, because it just gets better and better. Plus, it's just, I find these are the best ways to just kind of quote-unquote grind mats, because you get so many kills in them as compared to some of the other mission types that they drop stuff quicker. And here we go again. Yeah, so again, round after round. I think this is wave 5 I'm on now in this particular level that I ran a little while ago. And we're just waiting for it to start, I believe, or are we just waiting for... There's the enemy coming. That guy that's got kind of a red outline is actually a tougher version of the standard enemy. They sometimes drop better things too, which is nice. And as you can see here, because these enemies tend to like to charge the stuff down, using melee is probably more effective than using guns. But, you know, it's all good. You can kind of figure out what you want to do. There's some guys that go in the towers at least. They snipe, and there's some Warframes that have different abilities. Like a Rhino's a tank. He's got to be in the thick of it to really shine. If you notice, I've got what's known as Rhino skin on, which is kind of a layer of metal on me, which absorbs a certain amount of damage before it dissipates, and that's very useful. There's Warframes, like Warframes that have different abilities. That things like a Banshee Warframe is kind of a sniper character because it has sonar. Its abilities are based on sound. A lot of the there's characters called Ember, which all of her abilities are based on fire, and she's kind of a high DPS, squishy Warframe. She's not as tough. My Ash, which is a stealth-based Warframe, because there is a pretty solid stealth mechanic in this game too, where you can sneak up and stealth kill people, and there's silent weapons in there too, like bows and things like that, which are a lot of fun. Now this is the end of wave 5, and if we had exited, we would have gotten that card as a reward. But since the 4 of us decided, we're not done yet, we could keep going for better results. So we just wait for this to get started again, and here we go. Another wave. Now we go from wave 5 to 10. It's awesome. This is definitely an interesting game in a lot of respects too. Like, I mean, there's 15 different Warframes to choose from currently, but they keep adding them. And the Warframes are kind of classed by tanks, tough ones. There's some that are sort of a mix of DPS and tankish. There's some that are utility or extensive in utility. There's some that are heavy on caster DPS, which is damage per second, if none of you guys aren't familiar with the term. And it just makes it very cool in the sense that if you like these kinds of shooting games, you'll definitely find something that appeals to you. Rhino appeals to me a great deal because whenever I'm playing things, it's always heavy characters and tanks and things like that. I like being a slugger that's right in the middle of it, and I enjoy that sort of aspect of the game. I'll still play the other roles, that's why I was building Ash, obviously, but tank is probably my default, or the one that appeals to me the most. There's some Warframes that are, again, designed for a mix or an in-betweener, and they have different abilities. If you catch that orange one that's in the top right corner that's running in front of me, that's an Ember. She sets things on fire. She's a high DPS class. She's kind of squishy, but you know, she can hold her own. There was another Rhino just off the screen there, and I think we had one more character in this round, which I haven't taken a look at yet. It's been a while since I played it. And again, just keep going. And as you see, newer enemies are coming in, tougher ones. Like those tall ones are called Ancients that are black. It's kind of hard to see because he's on fire right now, or just dead. But they are tougher. They take different damage types to kill them. There's 3 different main damage types in this game. There's Puncture, there's Impact, and there's Slash. And each one provides damage bonuses or penalties to certain types of enemies as well. For example, Infested, especially the low-level ones, are all considered flesh enemies, and flesh enemies take the most damage from Slash, which, you know, makes sense. Now, there are other 2 factions in this game. There's a shield-based faction, or excuse me, a sort of a technology-based faction called Corpus. They use a lot of robotics. They have magnetic shields and things like that to protect themselves. Now in this game, impact damage does the most effectiveness towards things like shields and stuff like that. So if you're facing a lot of guys with shields, you probably want to be running with impact weapons. And now impact weapons come in a lot of different flavors as well, so you can usually find something that works. There's some impact weapons that are guns. There's some impact weapons that are melee, for example, hammers. Hammers are impact damage. You can get, and there's another. Then the last faction in the game that I haven't mentioned yet is a Grenier, which is a lot of cloned, heavily armored troops, and they use a lot of like metal armors and ferrite armors to protect themselves. And for the armor-based enemies, or heavy armor-based enemies, you probably want to use puncture damage because that will cut through a lot of the armor and goes damage straight to the character itself. Now, every faction isn't so perfectly lined up that, you know, if you're going with Infested, take all Slash. If you're going with Corpus, take all Impact. If you're going against Grenier, take all Puncture. That's just the sort of damages that sort of work better. But for example, in this Infested round, you can see the fodder, or the little blue and white guys, fall to Slash damage pretty quick. However, the big black ones that have like the red tentacles and things like that, they're actually armored. So they take better damage from puncture in some cases. Plus you have elemental damage types like poison, fire, cold, and electricity. And those are all great on themselves. Obviously electricity is good for shields, fire is good against flesh, cold is good against shields, and poison is good against flesh, so to speak. That's a broad generalization, please don't quote me on it. But you can also mix these damage types. For example, if you mix fire and cold in your weapons, you get blast damage, which is good against shields, I believe. And then if you mix electricity and cold, you get magnetic, which is really good against shields. And robots, if you mix fire and electricity, you get radiation, which also disorients people and things like that, screws them up a bit. And if you do poison and fire, you end up with gas, which is, you know, when you fire your weapon or hit it with your weapon, it does a little AoE puff of gas, which is great against doing some AoE damage against fleshy targets. Things that breathe, quote unquote. So anyway, it creates a lot of really interesting customization, in my opinion, and turned into one hell of a game that I've actually become a fair bit addicted to. I also love the fact that if you log in once a day, you get what's known as a login reward. It's like a little casino dinger that goes over and gives you free rewards, so that's kind of addicting too. Also, if you guys been noticing as well, I've got this little flying thing behind me that's hovering over my shoulder. That's called a Sentinel, and there's a few types of those, and they have different utility. For example, the one I've got is called a Carrier, and he's basically a vacuum cleaner. So he picks up stuff in a wider radius as I walk over it, so I don't have to search for stuff as much. But there's damage-based sentinels that help do more DPS. There's stealth-based sentinels that help do more stealthy gameplay. And there's a couple other utility ones as well. And again, all this stuff is, can be acquired through blueprints and then manufactured in your foundry. And it's just, you don't really have to play for everything or pay for anything if you have the time. Me, I'm a bit more of a professional, I'm a little bit of an older gamer, so therefore I don't mind spending a little bit of money to support the devs and take the grindiness out of things. Right now, this great big fire ability was one of Ember's abilities, and it's just basically burns everything that comes in contact with it. So, as you get higher and higher, especially in these survivals, you need to rely more and more on crowd control and AoEs to kind of keep things. That's why I'm doing that jump, because my swords do that flame ring, that WWE flame attack that catches things on fire. I just picked up a card that helps kill these guys, which is kind of awesome. Yeah, and those little round containers that I pick up are also materials that can be used to build other warframes, other weapons, things of that nature. And I do like this because there's such a variety of weapons. Like, for example, your main weapons, you've got rifles, you've got shotguns, you've got, snipers. Those are pretty typical of any shooter type game. But you've also got bows. A good old drawstring bow where you pull it back and let her go. And those are very powerful to compensate. So that was pretty wicked, and we just got to round 10, and as you can see here, dude wanted to leave, and since that left me just 2 other guys, I figured, it's time to go anyway. I'll take that card and just call her a day. And yeah, so these are the rewards. I level up all my weapons. 30 is the max level, so everything usually goes to 30. But anyway, that's my introduction to Warframe. I hope you enjoyed it. This is Scott, signing off. See you guys in the verse. Take care.